So, Apurva, should we start?
Yeah, I think we should.
Okay.
So, hello everyone. A very, very warm welcome from United States Agency for International Development, what we call as USAID, to each one of you. I know these are very, very difficult times that we are living in. Each one of us have seen some personal difficulties and tragedies and seeing it all around. So, we wish you and your families to be absolutely safe and healthy in these difficult times. And the fact that you all have joined in today for this webinar kind of reiterates the fact that in spite of all difficulties, it's the sharing and the caring and the learning curve that never stops. So it's very heartening to have all of you join this webinar in these difficult times. Just to introduce myself, my name is Apurva Chaturvedi, and I'm the Senior Clean Energy Specialist at USAID India, looking after several areas in the clean energy space, including utilities, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, smart grids, and so on. And this webinar is actually a part of the South Asia Energy Series. It's part of the USAID's Asia Edge initiative, which is meant for knowledge sharing in the South Asia region. This webinar is brought to you basically in sort of conjunction with three different programs. One is SARE, or the South Asia Regional Energy Hub, which is being represented by Pramod here, Ipshita, and Atul. We also have another bilateral program of US India, which is SPARK, Smart Power for Advancing Reliability and Connectivity. We will have speaker from there representing the SPARK program, Rajesh Singla. We also have Kavita, the senior advisor from KPMG, which is implementing this program. We also have Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, the think tank for the Industry Association on energy efficiency, and we have speakers from AEEE as well as joining in. Chandana. So these three are the agencies which have brought together this webinar. Now we all know that electric vehicle is the future of road transport. That's the way to go. And the industry is soon going to reach a tipping point on this. There has been a rapid decline in the battery cost, and the economies of scale are rapidly reducing the cost of EVs and bringing it in at almost at par with the ICE vehicles. Use of bigger size batteries in latest models is addressing a lot of range anxiety. While a majority of the EV charging for two-wheelers and cars take place at home currently, availability of the public charging infrastructure is essential to reduce barriers related to charge anxiety for large-scale adoption and long-distance usage of EVs. Setting up a public charging infrastructure is almost like a chicken egg situation. Whether you should have sufficient EVs on the road, then you would set up the infrastructure, or to have those EVs on the road, you should have the sufficient infrastructure on the charging station side. So it's a very difficult sort of a judgment call to take. Setting up public, I would say that we now already have a critical mass of vehicles, and simultaneous development of the charging infrastructure both go hand in hand. A lot of business models have been tried globally, and two of the things have become most important in selecting the right model. A model that creates synergy among the different stakeholders, and models that are likely to achieve financial and operational sustainability. The first part of the EV series was organized on 11th March, and we covered the techniques for location assessment for public charging station. We covered types of chargers and criteria for selection, critical role of government agencies in enabling the EV charging infrastructure. So all this was previously covered. Now in today's second part today, the speakers from the SPARK program will cover the economics of EV charging. Also, the speaker from AEEE will present different business models globally adopted, and speaker from Magenta Power and Lithium Power will present the industry experience on public charging, shared charging, battery swapping models. So today's discussion becomes important as government and private companies are betting on expanding the public charging infrastructure, anticipating the future increase in usage. Therefore, it is prudent to optimize the cost and identify the business arrangements where risks are shared. Unfortunately, one of our speakers from ESL, Mr. Mohan, is down with COVID and is currently hospitalized, so we don't have him today. We will miss the experience of ESL on EVs. But hopefully, Rajesh, who works closely with ESL on the EV charging infrastructure, would be able to cover some of his talking points in his presentation. This webinar also comes on the heels of the recent Climate Leaders Summit convened by US President Biden to tackle global climate crisis through collective actions, where Prime Minister Modi also was one of the key participants. Supporting the transition to electric vehicles globally is a major focus area of this renewed and bold climate efforts. And USAID is launching 7 new generation clean energy programs under the Energizing a Net Zero Asia initiative, which is more than a $200 million initiative to establish foundation for a net zero energy grid in Asia, and electric vehicles will be a big focus area under this initiative. I think that's all I would like to say. The speakers will cover a lot of specific questions. But before that, just a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, this webinar is getting recorded. The agenda and the speaker's profile would be there in the chat box. You can have a look at it if you want. Speakers to mute themselves when they're not speaking. You can use the chat window for a general remark, but please use the question answer option for live questions, which will be discussed during the Q&A session. And the webinar recording as well as the presentations of the speakers will be made available to you after this webinar to all the attendees. So with that, I would now like to invite the first speaker, Rajesh Singla, who belongs to KPMG, the implementing partner for the USAID Spark program. Rajesh has a lot of 7+ years of experience in the power sector. And as part of the Spark program, he has supported ESL in the design and deployment of the public charging infrastructure for EVs. He will deliver the presentation on the economics of EV charging infrastructure. So over to you, Rajesh, and his CV will be available to you in the chat box. So Rajesh, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As Pooja mentioned, I would be covering the cost economics for the EV charging infrastructure. The overall content, I would be first setting up the context with overview of USAID Spark program, going ahead with how EVs are being deployed across India, and what are the cost economics of PCS, what are the different pricing mechanisms that are followed across the globe, and what are the key regulatory aspects that needs to be taken into account. USAID Spark is a 3-year US-India bilateral program aimed at supporting modernization of electricity distribution reforms in India. One of the key component in this program was design and deployment of public charging infrastructure for electrical vehicles, where we helped ESL in installation and deployment of charging infrastructure across the country. All the learnings from this particular assistance was then captured under a practitioner's guide, which was released in January 2020. The link of this will be shared with you. Across the globe, we have seen that the deployment of EVs has increased multifold. Various Asian governments are also aiming to promote EVs with a focus of reducing air pollution as well as getting more energy secure. Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Singapore all have set certain targets for adoption of EVs in near future. Now, the USAID Spark program, as I mentioned earlier, helped ESL in deployment of charging infrastructure. As part of this assistance, we divided our whole assignment into 4 parts. One is business model design, then location assessment, user interface and EV analytics, to bring out insights from the utilization of EVs. And then we also helped ESL in scaling up for the whole EV ecosystem throughout the country. Now, before I jump to the cost economics, I will just like to brief what kind of business model was followed by ESL. ESL tied up with number of bulk land owners, which include local municipalities or other entities, where they signed an MOU and they pay them basis the utilization of the charging infrastructure, basically on basis of energy being consumed to the chargers. With the power utility, they apply for the power load and get power connection. ESL is act as a one single point to interact with all these stakeholders, and for the user, ESL provides the charging services. Now, the benefit of this model is considering there is a unique mechanism of land leasing based on energy charges instead of on fixed charges. Then, by aggregating demand across the country, they were able to reduce the cost of procurement, and with low cost financing available to ESL through various multilaterals helped reduce the overall cost of charging infrastructure. Now, coming to the cost economics, it's usually believed that whenever there is a public charging infrastructure, it's only the cost of power that has to be levied. But there are a host of other costs which needs to be recovered through the charging infrastructure, which includes the cost of EV charger. Sometimes there has to be some other assets, for instance, distribution transformers or other distribution assets needs to be installed. All those costs needs to be recovered. Then there is the cost of civil works and installation of chargers, auxiliary equipment, so then, for instance, CCTV or POS system needs to be installed. Then there are costs to get the power connection from the utilities, charger management system, which is basically a digital platform to manage the charger and to provide location booking services to the customer also needs to be recovered. Then land cost can be actually a capital cost if it's being paid on, if the land is owned by the charge point operators, or can be operational cost if there is certain leasing mechanism being developed. Then there has to be some annual maintenance of the chargers. Insurance of the charger needs to be taken care of. All these costs add up to the total EV service charges, EV charging service charges that are being levied to the users. Now, if you see now here the chart depicts there are three different type of chargers. One is AC001, which is a Indian standard of very low capacity. It supports 3.3 kilowatt of power output. Second is DC001, which again is a Indian specific Bharat standard, which supports a power output of 15 kilowatt DC power. And the third charger that we looked at is a combo charger, which we have named C142, which basically has two DC guns of 60 kilowatt each and one AC gun of 22 kilowatt. Now we see that the cost of power is just 40% of 142 kilowatt, where the other cost, for instance, capex cost again contributes equally to 40%, and opex cost contributes to roughly 20%. As you move along this particular power voltage, the cost of equipment increases. That's why the share of capital expenditure also increases. Now, to ensure that the charging infrastructure is affordable, one needs to ensure that both OPEX and CAPEX are reduced. ESL has already worked at reducing the CAPEX by bringing in bulk procurement as well as the location. This was a part of the location assessment strategy also, which we covered in part 1 of the webinar, where they identified locations where minimum to minimum CAPEX is being invested. Second key consideration for charging infrastructure is that the utilization factor is critical to come up with the end consumer service charges. As and when the fixed charges increases, the sensitivity of this service charges further increases with the utilization. This chart, the dark blue, just depicts that if the utilization increases from 10 to 20%, the service charges can be reduced, let's say from 100% and 10% to 71%, which is basically a reduction of 30%. So certain strategies also needed to ensure that there are high utilization of chargers, which may include tying up with the cab aggregators or other bulk users of EVs. For instance, ESR also tied up with a number of EV aggregators, and right now they contribute to more than 90% of the overall charging being done through the public charging infrastructure. Across the globe, if you see, the utilization has been at very low level. In developed countries where the charging infrastructure, the EV market has matured a bit, we see the utilization is merely 3 to 4% or limited to 5%. In fact, empirical studies also suggest that people usually don't charge through public charging infrastructure that frequently. It's only at certain times, for instance, traveling between cities, that they try to use chargers. In that also, they value the fast charging infrastructure more as compared to slow charging infrastructure. For instance, in this particular study was 22 kilowatt. And the average top up that we see, it's not that the people come here and come at charging infrastructure and try to fully load their vehicle. It's just they want a small top up, which is maybe around 10 kilowatt hour, which provides them certain range so that they can reach to their final destination. Now, as I mentioned, that there is more to the charging infrastructure than the cost of power. Across the globe, we have seen that the charging rates that the charge point operator CPO levies on the end consumer is roughly around the 3 times the cost of power. Usually users compare this particular to come up whether the EVs are getting economical or not. Now, pricing mechanism across the globe, we have seen there are 3 main types of pricing methods being followed. One is time-based fee, second is energy-based fee, and third is a fixed fee, which basically is levied irrespective of the time you have used the charger or the amount of energy you have consumed from the charger. Time-based fee, as the name suggests, is levied basis the time you have been on the charging unit. Energy-based is basically charged basis a number of units you have, number of electricity units that you have consumed. There are pros and cons for both. Time-based is something, fee is basically something which is easily comprehended by the end consumers. They are able to correlate. But however, this may lead to very high effective cost to the consumers. Energy-based charges is difficult to be absorbed by the consumers, but this ensures there is an equitable cost that are being levied for charging EVs. There has been some time that the charging infrastructure across the globe has matured a bit. It started with free charging initially. For instance, Tesla provided free charging to all its consumers. After which, then they have started, some players started charging fee on basis energy beyond a particular threshold. Then companies started introducing idle fee once they started that there has been significant penetration of EVs. For instance, Tesla also introduced a charge of around $1 per minute post 100% charging of the EV at the charging station. Now, this was one set of evolutionary mechanism. Then they have moved to time and energy based charging, which are being followed by ESL, Westcoms, and Fortum in India and across the globe also. As I mentioned, these 3 are predominantly being followed. Now, in the new highly mature markets, there are membership and premium pricing models which are coming up, where a member pays a premium for accessing that, subscribing to the charger for a certain time, and in return he will get either charging infrastructure at a discounted price or free of cost till a certain threshold. There are certain advanced mechanisms also followed where utilities or the CPO are charging people basis the actual prices in the market, basically time of use pricing. This actually helps utilities in managing the grid also. Across the globe, as I mentioned, we have collated few pricing mechanisms. EVgo is charging on per time basis. electric circuit is charging on both on per session as well as on per hour basis whatever the location is, and they are also charging on per unit basis. In India, Fortum is charging only on per unit as for low capacity charges, but for high capacity charges they are charging on per time basis. As I mentioned earlier, the charging infrastructure is highly dependent on utilization, and we have seen across the globe in the mature market the utilization is not that significant, limiting to 5%. There are mechanisms are required to ensure that the charging infrastructure becomes profitable by reducing this utilization risk. One of the mechanism that is being followed across the globe is through advertisement. In fact, there is a company, Volta Charging, which provides free of cost charging to its consumers, and they just earn from the advertisement. So all these kind of mechanisms are being explored. Now, coming to the regulatory aspects, we see that across the globe, the power is a regulated asset, is a regulated thing. So there is some bit of overlap between charging infrastructure and power regulations. So certain clarity is required on the mechanism to fix the end consumer service charges. For instance, in India, Government of India has issued a guideline saying that cost of power would be decided by respective SERC, but end consumer charges has to be decided by charge point operators. There has not been any limit decided as of now that what this end consumer service charges could be. In Nepal, we say that the regulator has issued guidelines to limit the service charges up to only 20% of the cost of power. Then clarity is required that what kind of pricing mechanism that should be followed. In India, again, this mechanism has been left, the choice is left to CPO. But in US, we see that certain states doesn't allow service charges on per unit basis. So in those states, the CPOs then charge on basis time. Before issuing any limits on the fixed on the end consumer service charges, there are certain parameters which needs to be considered. For instance, as I mentioned, the utilization of charger is very low. Now, if the end consumer service charge is being fixed, there may be a risk that people, the private investors may not invest in the areas where there is very few EVs or where the expectation of utilization is very low. So the whole investment would then be focused only on the high utilization areas, and there may be a limited scope for increasing the EV adoption in other areas. Secondly, power capacity. Now, if the end consumer service charge has to be fixed, if the regulator goes ahead with that particular decision, then perhaps they also need to take into account that high capacity chargers are more expensive than low capacity charger. So if there is a fixed limit irrespective of the power capacity, then people, the private investors especially, may only invest in the low capacity chargers, and general public may not get a significant advantage of high capacity charges. So regulator may need to look at all these aspects before fixing the mechanism and capping the end consumer service charges. So that's it from my. Over to you, Purva.
Thank you, Rajesh, for this insightful presentation. You really covered very well the economics of the charging infrastructure. With that, may I now request Chandana, for a senior research associate with AEEE. Chandana works in the distributed energy resources domain focusing on electric vehicles, demand response, flexible loads, energy storage, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. She has over 8 years of experience and is competent in power system studies, data science, and energy modeling. She will now be speaking on globally adopted EV charging business models. Over to you, Chandana.
Hi everyone. I'm a little bit under the weather, so please pardon me if I stop in between. I hope everybody who is having a family member or a close relative who is suffering from the pandemic, I wish them all the best. I am keeping everybody in my thoughts. Having said that, what I am trying to do today is to provide an overview of the globally adopted EV charging business models. I'll particularly focus on models which I think are critically important from the South Asia perspective. So as Rajesh explained earlier from the economics, we can see that if I have to set up a charging business, I need land definitely because I need space to park the vehicle. Even if it is a battery swapping business model, maybe the land footprint I need is a little less. It's not little less, it's actually quite less, but nevertheless, the fact is you definitely require land. And the second portion is you need electricity supply. This is where the discoms can actually come in and play a big role, especially in India and South Asian countries. And the third person that you need to come into this picture is the manufacturer of the EVSE. When I say the EVSE manufacturer, I'm not just talking about the hardware, because there is also a soft component of the charging management system, which we sometimes often forget to account for, because charger is not just a hardware. There is also a mechanism that allows the charge point operator to monitor and even control his system at that point. And what do I see globally is that the other players in the EV ecosystem, especially the EV manufacturers and the EV fleet operators, they also want to come in and establish charge point operator. So the picture that I want to present in front of you is that a charge point operator could be a third party who is not a landowner, who's not an electricity supplier, who's not an EVSE manufacturer, who's not an EV manufacturer or an EV fleet operator. This could be an entirely different third party who wants to come in and set up a business. But the case of duality is also possible. The EV manufacturers could be interested in setting up charging points. The landowners could be interested in setting up charging points. The electricity supplier, the discom itself could be setting up charging points. And this is actually not a one-person game. This is not a zero-sum game wherein, collaboration is not possible. All of these players can collaborate with each other, and that is the way that we are seeing charging stations established up. Some of the examples I try to present in front of you, you might have seen these cases already. So petrol pumps are natural locations where a lot of vehicle traffic happen. Their location has been decided based on that pattern. And now what we are seeing is that people are setting up charging stations at petrol pumps. Next is the mall parking. It's a place where cars are actually parked for more than an hour, and those are the locations where charging stations are setting up. My friend Maxon here can talk more about the example 3 that I'm presenting. These are street light pole chargers. These are basic chargers you can provide everywhere, anywhere, wherever you have access to a street light, which is like an existing infrastructure that is available. And on the fourth part is the swapping that is possible at your local kirana shops. You just need to keep 2 to 3 batteries. And this is a mechanism that we have seen that Bounce is promoting in India. But today, what I'm going to talk about, my narrative is going to be centered around 3 things. One is, how do we tackle the fleet charging problem? Because a fleet charging problem is a little complicated than a single user. Fleets definitely travel more distances. They have distinct patterns, and their charging requirements could actually be higher. And definitely, how do we make charging utility centric? The utility that I'm talking about here is our electricity distribution utility in particular. And also we'll talk about the role of what public-private partnerships are there to facilitate the charging game. So if I will have to present you, sorry, if I have something is happening with my slide, one set didn't come, but I suppose I'll use this to explain. So for an electric utility, from an electric utility perspective, or if I were to break down the charging problem, which Rajesh also explained, to break down into two little pieces, one of the charging that would happen is the residential or the community charging. Secondly, you will have all the shared charging that is happening at any workspaces. Third is any shared charging facilities that are happening at public parking. And the fourth is a public charging or a swapping station, which is the model that like a lot of people are focused on. These are standalone stations which stand like petrol pumps. And finally, there could be solutions that are from a fleet charging and swapping solution perspective. And we will try to evaluate all of these examples from the value proposition from the involvement of an electric utility. So going towards electric utility, so the one thing that the electric utilities have actually tried to do, which you would hear this case, there are specific tariff for EV charging and services, and these are particularly directed at chargers which are available to the public. So what we need to understand is we need to move away from the mechanism of what is a dedicated charger that is for one user, even if it is at a workspace, even if it is at a residence, or even if it is at a public parking facility or any parking facility, and move to what could be the shared infrastructure that is available. So, and when we think about shared infrastructure, one of the things that we see utilities have tried to do is they have actually tried to invest a little bit in installation of chargers. This is not true everywhere, but this is a tendency that we see globally in a lot of cases. So out of the 5 examples that I've put in the table for you, under 4 of them, utility have actually decided to make their own investment. Some of them actually receive subsidy from the governments, which actually brings down the cost of the charging infrastructure. Nevertheless, we actually see the utilities being interested in making these investments. Now, the second portion of it is what is the biggest, kind of advantage or the distinction that they're making to these cases. So if I talk about residences, I'm talking about not a single user residence, but I'm actually talking about an apartment complex, which might have a significantly high connected load. And what is the ball game which might give the maximum offering here is that what if I can also provide EV charging from within the bounds of the existing sanctioned or connection load? This is possible for a workplace. This is possible for a residence. When I talk about public parking facilities, if the public parking facility is associated with the commercial plates, definitely this matters. But if I'm talking about a public parking facility without any pre-existing infrastructure, this is definitely not correct. And what is the ball game that the DISCOM is trying to attack here is first of the problem that they can tackle is they can minimize the investment for distribution upgrades, and they can also get value added services, which we'll actually see and discuss later. So there are 5 programs in front of you, 2 from California, 1 from UK, 1 from Norway, and 1 from Dubai. And you can see that the cases that these utility programs have targeted is charging at residences and workplaces and public parking. So to give you an example of a case where the utility did not invest actually in the charging infrastructure, but then they made a little bit of investment actually to get the places charge ready, as the program's name is. So typically what happens is a utility role is actually ending at the meter. Now, under this program, what had happened is they asked consumers to procure charging stations. Now, this can definitely be supported. The consumer investment for them can be supported under subsidies, definitely. And on the consumer side, the utility installed the panel as well as the conduits and wires and everything that goes till the charging point, so that for the consumer also, it was quite easy. And this charging stations were maintained as shared charging stations. That is not a dedicated charging station for a consumer. The only criteria that the consumer had to maintain that he need to operate the charging stations open for the general public. So this is actually considered as a good example of a model which you can follow when the utility did make some investment, but they did not own and operate the chargers. But definitely the utility also had a role to enable EV charging. One of the interesting examples of charging facilities, I think it is relevant, especially in the case of India and South Asia, is this fact that EV adoption is happening in our cities. And our cities are known for having space crunch, especially for parking spaces. We are not having single homes which have garages where we can charge our electric vehicles in itself. So the curbside charging or on the on-street charging, it becomes a critical area where a lot of investment can be done. We should remember that China, who's actually one of the leading countries in the EV market, they have also done a lot of these chargers. They call them charging piles, and they are also installed everywhere on the road. The examples that you are seeing is mostly what is from London, because London, some of our cities, the dedicated parking space is quite less, and people actually park their vehicles on the road. And then London is a classic example of facilitating charging at parking spaces. And this can be used not just for privately used own vehicles, but also for commercial vehicles. Now, how do you actually facilitate this? To facilitate this, the electric utility in itself definitely cannot do that. The municipality or the city authority in that area need to come forward, and the parking space vendor, whosoever is managing the parking spaces, these are very common in Indian cities. This could be a parking space which is on the side of a road, but that is managed. There is a tendering and a bidding process for that. And such spaces are good examples for charging. So on-street parking is applicable not just for when I park my vehicle outside my home. This could be when I park at my workplace, or even when I park at any public parking space. And these kind of business model, what would happen is the parking free component and the charging free component actually pretty much comes together. If I were to give you an example of a V2G project, which is the vehicle to grid integration project that happened in France, we actually saw cases where the consumer, he did not get a monetary benefit for the V2G services his vehicle was offering. The benefit that he received was in the reduction of a parking charge, which the consumer also appreciated. So that's why I believe these are pretty critical for cities, especially in South Asia. Now, the same problem, we think, okay, I can do roadside parking, but initially what we see is they were low power chargers. Now, for the city is one of the classic game that they might want to get into is facilitating, let's say, electric taxi fleets. Now, if I talk about logistic fleet, that is a different equation. That's why I thought about passenger taxi fleets, especially electric fleets. And globally, if you take the case, you can see that there are a lot of cities who are interested in this. So just to give you a shot of, what different cities are doing. So in London, what they are doing is these precise zones on street chargers. What they did is they made it, increased the capacity, the power capacity of these chargers. They are from 43 to 99 kilowatt, and that can actually suit the requirement and enable even a taxi fleet. And whereas in Oslo, they tried a different model. They're actually trying out a different model entirely. They are trying wireless charging of the taxis while they are actually stopping in their parking bays. So both are technically complex, but between the wireless charging and the curbside charge point option, perhaps the curbside charge point option could be better in economics. But to facilitate all of this, what we have to understand, it cannot be just the role of a charge point operator. The city authority, as well as the electric utility, and if there is a parking space vendor, all of them need to work together to facilitate this. One could even view charging actually as a service, because we are in the era of looking at everything as a service. And so one of the models that are constantly talked about is providing charging as a service. And I'm trying to link it with parking spaces that are available. So anywhere in the city, consider the same constraint of availability of land. The existing parking lots can be retrofitted and used for EV chargers. And cities, especially in policies, you would have seen that they actually reserve a lot of parking spaces for EVs. And it's perhaps possible to combine and get a new value proposition from both of them, where the parking spaces can be retrofitted with chargers. But we have to realize is these kind of locations are mostly for, daytime charging and top up. Hence, let me also present you a distinct example, which is actually coming from India. In fact, this is a new business model that people are trying out. This is where the shared spaces are actually used for EV charging. Different type of fleets can come in and charge that. This could be passenger fleet and logistic fleet. So this is not just charging as a service. This is actually charging and parking as a service. This is about such hubs being set up in cities where it can cater to multiple fleet owners. And this will facilitate not just daytime charging, but also overnight charging and parking. So this is actually a cost intensive business model, but this is still something. If you have an arrangement with a set of fleet operators who also want space to park their vehicles overnight, this is perhaps a win-win situation that can be created for all of these things. And finally, my friend Chandrasekhar is actually here to talk to you more about battery swapping. And we did cover about the technology of battery swapping in the last end. So as you already know, I've already explained it earlier, the footprint required for a swapping station is quite less in compared with a charging station. But what I want to bring your attention to is this aspect that swapping can actually happen in two ways. One is under a closed ecosystem where the battery that you need to swap is actually used by a service provider, which is happening with Gogoro and Sun Mobility in India and all that. This is a good system, and there are proprietary batteries that are used in the system. So if you want to avail the services in your vehicle, you will actually have to use their batteries. So you're not just paying for the charging of the batteries, you are also paying for some charges for using or leasing out the batteries, and you're also paying some charge for charging of the batteries. So this is one ecosystem, but yeah, as you can actually see, this is a very, very capital intensive business model to work with swapping. On the other end, an open ecosystem is also possible. So any battery can be charged, but you don't need complete standardization. But you need some amount of minimum standardization to get the ball going. This is on the connector, how they communicate, on the charger contacts, all of those aspects. And the service provider can simply only provide charging. And this is also one ecosystem that might actually be beneficial for the South Asian countries because it's not that capital intensive. The consumer can own the battery, or the fleet operator, anybody can own the battery. And it could be a third party also who can own the battery. It doesn't really matter. But the service for the battery is mostly in the terms of the charging perspective. But I also want to bring out, when we get into battery swapping, there are additional add-on benefits that are possible, especially for fleet operation. One could be the geolocking of the vehicle to ensure that the fleet doesn't travel out of a certain geological location. You can actually lock out the vehicle from moving. So this is an additional value proposition to prevent misuse. And it's also possible under swapping to actually do the health monitoring of the battery quite easily, because you're directly talking to the battery and it's being charged. So that's another advantage that we pretty much see with the battery swapping. So for a fleet operator, the battery swapping person is not just providing energy for the battery, he's also providing additional services under the business model. And continuing my thought on what additional services could be offered, one is you treat the EV charging problem as selling of electricity in itself. That is definitely, an easier way to go about it. But by nature of an EV charger, charge point operator having access to multiple charging stations, they are in a natural position of being aggregators of EV charging demand. It doesn't matter if the CPO is doing it or its all, the DISCOM are doing it, or anybody who is in the value system is doing it, but they can actually control the charging demand management, and there can be a market. There is a market actually available globally for this. And then when I take it to one more step, any control that is possible for the electric vehicles can also provide a lot of support to the local grid for grid balancing and accommodating a large amount of solar or any other things like that. So that is also another value proposition that is possible actually from an EV charging station. And for that to happen, the only thing that we need to do is to ensure that our hardware and our software is actually future proof to do that. And these value streams can actually improve the economics of an EV charging business, even if the utilization is for a limited number of times. But your vehicles are available, even if they're not charging, maybe the charge point operator can use them to provide grid services. And this is a value stream that can be explored.
Chandana, your time is almost up. So if you could wind up.
I'm just finishing it. Yeah. So I just wanted to walk you through a utility-based business model under which this is being done. So there is a DISCOM, there is an energy service company. In this case, this is the Sacramento Municipal Utility and NLX. And between both of them, they are able to provide this peak management services. And they also demonstrated ability to handle a large set of fleet for conversion of EV. And these are examples that are on the ground. So the key takeaways from my slides is that utilities definitely have a key role to play in upscaling EV charging businesses, and they can also benefit from the ecosystem because ultimately they gain from selling power. Stakeholder partnerships are quite important if for any business model to realize, and fleet charging is a priority segment wherein, you know, if we are investing in EV charging, one of your prime consumer could be the fleet operator. Think of EV charging as a service and charging and parking as a service, and use it effectively with parking spaces. And like definitely think of open swapping models as well. And also to finalize, the value proposition from EV charging actually goes beyond the sale of power in itself. That is where I am ending my slides. Thank you, everyone.
For your very in-depth presentation on the different business models. And you're very right, utilities have a big role to play here. In fact, we consider utilities as looking at this charging infrastructure as a revenue model in future, as they kind of revamp the way they do business. So this could be an interesting revenue generating stream for them in the future. With that, I would now like to invite Maxon Lewis, Managing Director, Magenta Power. Maxon has over 20 years of professional experience in automotive, power sector, clean energy solutions, and management consulting. In his past assignments, he's led many consulting assignments globally in capital projects, system design, and implementation in the areas of entire value chain of power, generation, transmission, and distribution. Maxon will present on the innovative business models for shared charging in residential complexes and commercial spaces. With that, over to you, Maxon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this opportunity to share my experience in the EV charging space. And for those who are joining this call from outside India, I will try and make sure that I share the experience that we in India have had around EV charging. So with that, let me start off. And as a matter of principle, when we start with one very important slide. Let me know when you can see the screen, please. Can you confirm if you can see the slide?
Yes, it's visible, Maxon. Go ahead.
Despite the fact that it's a short time that I have, I'll spend 30 seconds to talk about safety. As a company in the business of EV charging, while electric vehicles is a lot more safer than the petrol and diesel tanks that we carry, we travel in. But the transition of energy happens especially during the charging from the charger to the vehicle, and that's the point where safety is most important. And as a company, we believe that we need to start talking about safe charging. For us, safe charging is most important. It's not only charging, it's safe charging, and hence in everything that we do, design, deliver, we believe safety is going to be the biggest concern, and we encourage everyone to follow that. So whenever you have a decision to make in EV charging, if it is between something which is cheaper and which is safer, go for safer. One mishap and it can undo the entire EV ecosystem. One slide about Magenta, for not many people know about it, but we are an integrated EV solutions player. It's not only about charging. We start all the way from generation of clean energy. As a matter of principle, our mission is to empower electric mobility, but make electricity clean. So we have 4 business lines. One business line is in the business of generating clean energy. The second is what we are known for is ChargeGrid, which is the EV charging solutions. We also have an informatics arm, which is a technology, and we also have an EVET platform. And not many people know this. EVET stands for Electric Vehicle Enabled Transport. This is a platform for which we are doing a couple of pilots in 2 cities in India, both passenger and cargo. So it's an entire value chain. But I'm going to focus today's discussion around the EV charging solutions and try and give you an insight as to how things have evolved. One slide which I thought was very important is not many people know that electric vehicles in India started way back in 1970s, and that was one of the first initiatives with the moped by Electromobiles India Limited. It was a moped for 7,600 rupees, and that's when the EV revolution in India had actually started. And since then we have Reva. Chetan Maini is a household name now, thanks to his efforts earlier, and then Electrotherm came with the bikes. But if you really were to see, while people think it's only 2017, etc., when things really took off, that's not the case. The NEMMP program, National Electricity Mobility Mission Plan, included EV all the way in 2013. Another important point is the first state to announce an EV policy was actually Bihar way back in 2016. And since then, there are a lot of developments in India. I call it the tailwinds. And this is important, especially because in an industry, it's a fledgling industry. And like the speakers before me, especially from ESL, it's an amazing, and I know they have done some amazing work in this space, and the kind of analysis that came through is actually what everyone has to understand. Because it's a fledgling industry, utilization is low, and that is the time all the support that can be garnered to deliver this EV charging solution is important. Because unlike in the oil and gas-based systems, petrol, diesel, or ICE engines, the deployment of energy, which is the petrol fueling systems or the fueling systems, have got 100 years to stabilize themselves, to set up and have them in the back and beyond. But while electricity is there at everyone's home, the entire dispensing of energy for EV charging, it is going to take time. And like Chandana did mention, it is not only about the charger, it is a lot of more things that go in the back end before EV charging can become I would say, a business feasible pattern. But there's a huge upside to it, and I'm just sharing a slide which talks about the tailwinds and a huge market size. Because purely even in the EV charging itself, we're starting from zero, or let's say at this point I'm close to around 500 DC chargers across India. But from 500, you need all the way to go to 5,000 or more in the next 2 years. So the upside is huge, and that's the huge market. So for anyone who's believing in this industry, it's a good time to get in. But now let's debunk some myths and their learnings. And again, I'll repeat some of the things that have been said. Unlike you cannot copy paste international solutions, EV charging solutions to India for 4 reasons: heat, humidity, harmonics, and humans. Harmonics in this case is the power systems. Humans is the way we interface with public infrastructure. But that aside, in Europe or in North America, people have their vehicles come to their garages at their homes and then they charge. And which means that internationally, close to 60% to 70% of the charging happens at homes. Public charging is a range anxiety management system and not really a charging management system. So in India also is going to follow the same path, but India is going to be slightly unique because of the fact that unlike European or North America, not everyone has a parking lot to go and charge. So there's going to be a slightly more complex integration between public infrastructure, personal infrastructure. So we believe we have broken down the charging profiles into 4 types in India. One is destination charging. And when I say destination charging, it is home and offices, both come under destination. So you are traveling from point A to point B on a regular basis, and both places you need charging. And that's the cheapest and the best way of charging. The second is opportunity charging, is when I travel to a location. I want to watch a movie, so I go to a mall or a parking lot, etc. So it is not something which is planned. It is something which I just land and I see there's a charger next to me, so I use that for charging. So that's opportunity charging. En route charging is when the person is traveling distances and he realizes that he has to charge because otherwise he will have a misfortune of having a stranded car. So typically highway charging is where it comes in. And commercial charging is another segment for us, because this is very different from, there's no way you can mix commercial charging with public or standard charging, because commercial charging, the requirements is totally different. And when I say commercial charging, I'm talking about fleet charging. We call it commercial charging because the angle is not so much about the facilities or the experience. It's all about the availability of charger and without a long queue. So we believe these are the 4 profiles of charging that we cater to. And the protocols, of course, have kind of come in neat in India. I mean, we started off with DC001, but now we know that CCS2 is becoming a protocol of choice. This is from experience. So we believe that the CCS2 is going to take off, and that is supported by the fact that also the AC side is type 2. But we believe that still, while CCS2 will continue in type 2, the DC001 will play it out for the next couple of years till the fleet owners fleet vehicles transition. And we know that the next new fleet vehicles are already going to the CCS2 platform. So for that article I wrote, Chandana knows, is about 2 years ago, that DC001 is slightly redundant in the way it has been brought in, is becoming a fact. So the revenue potential is very simple: cell chargers and cell charging. It's a very simple mathematic, but unfortunately in that mathematics, the utilization factor is very low at this point, unless and until you chase commercial charging. So there are companies like ESL is supported by the government, and hence it is able to buy in chargers, deploy it. There's a systematic way they've gone through, and hence it becomes, if I won't call it a sustainable business model, but it's a business model which they are empowered to. But for private companies to get into the EV charging business, still there's a long way to manage this, because for many people, like the slides earlier said, more than 60% of the cost is nothing to, 20% of the cost is a charger. The rest of the cost is all about the infrastructure, the power and other things. And one of the costs, which not many people put it, is technology cost or depreciation as well. Because we see a lot of obsolescence, especially in the Indian ecosystem or the environmental condition, both the way human factors and also the environmental factors play out on the chargers. So there are a lot more costs. So when we get pushback saying, hey, electricity is around 8 rupees per unit, but then why are you charging higher? It's because all of that needs to be recovered. And one very important factor is the cost of real estate. So how is this going to play out? I've just kind of opened up the EV charging ecosystem. I'm not talking about swapping, but charging. How this is going to evolve. You have the power players, the utilities, and I'm just bunching them into power systems. So it's green energy, or even the discoms or the utility companies. Then you have people who provide the charging products or the hardware. They're called as charging point infrastructure producers, the CPIPs. So they manufacture the hardware and all the infrastructure which goes into it. Not setting it up, but manufacturing. So then the charging service provider, the CPO classically, is the company which puts all of it together and manages this and provides it as a service. And to support that, they pick up chargers, they pick up the power, they also pick up the charging software, and they work with real estate players as well. Now, internationally, what has happened at this point in time, a lot of companies are in everything. As CPO, there's an involvement across, but we believe that as the market matures, each of this will become consolidated, and individual companies will take bigger pieces of each of the pie. And we already see that happening. At this point, everyone believes I can put up a charger and start providing a service, but that's not what it is, because confidence of service, which means if someone is coming to a ChargeGrid charging station, he's coming with a lot of faith or be charged or even other way, but he's coming with a lot of faith, and you cannot increase the range anxiety with charging anxiety, where you say, oh, charger is down for XYZ reasons, which is a high probability. So we believe that each of them will start to consolidate into their own space, and this is how the entire thing will play out. As Magenta as a company, we are into a couple of these spaces, be it the products we provide charging as a service and software. So this is where we are currently working. In the real estate, now this is the interesting part from a Southeast Asia perspective, and what can be solved, what will be solved in India will get implemented in Southeast Asia. This is my personal belief, because if we can solve for India, we've solved for almost the world. Real estate is going to be a big problem, and that's where you need to find a leveraged model, be it the malls, chains, developers, highways, government. Because like Chandana said, and before me, other speakers have also said that it cannot be charging by itself as a business model doesn't sustain. You need to top it up, if I were to call it that, with a couple of things. Advertising revenue. In Europe, it's possible, but I'll just explain the Indian aspect. Advertising as a revenue, parking as a revenue. So these levels have to be built in, and unless and until you provide that integrated service, charge point operators will not be able to sustain. So that is why the CPO in India, I kind of change it to CSPO, which is charging and other services provider, because only then it is going to be sustainable. Now, there was a reference to the European model of advertising as a service, and hence a lot of providing free charging because advertising as a revenue is coming through. Yes, those models are getting evolved. Unfortunately, what happens is in that advertising, there's a human factor in India, which is the moment you have large screens and large displays, etc., there's a tendency to mismanage it, vandalize it as well. So all those factors, when you put in, the system is yet to evolve. But I personally, being Magenta as a company, which has been one of the pioneers from a private company perspective in EV charging, I'm yet to say that the business models are falling in place, and they will continue to fall in place. So as a company, we refresh our business model every 6 months, not even a year. Every 6 months, we start to challenge ourselves on what we can do next. This one slide is, and I'm going to explain what we have done. This is the future proposition for those of you all who think that, okay, it's EV charging and the EV charging infrastructure. That's a very limited play. There's a lot of build-up happening to happen. That's only the first layer. We have to catch up with 100 years of the fuel, oil and petrol and gas, petrol and diesel systems. So of that 100 years, we need to catch up on a lot of things, all the way building up to the V2H and V2G. Now coming to Magenta, Chandana did mention, this is the street lamp based EV charger. Chandana actually gave away the reasons why we did it, is when we were looking for, we don't believe in large heavy duty chargers. So if you were to come to a charging platform, you don't see a lot of DC chargers. We are focusing on small but multiple chargers across India. To that extent, of course, we are a company seed funded by HPCL. So this pilot was done in Delhi and Mumbai. Right now, we are also setting up the street lamp based EV chargers at a couple of railway stations in Mumbai. There's couple of them in Andhra Pradesh already. Nagpur is being set up. So we believe, and Chandana, next time I'll send you the photograph. I know you did pick up the London example, start using the Indian examples, because in India, there are companies who need that attention and who need that kind of opportunity to talk about it, because there's a lot more learning that we have got. So this is the charge grid. Flare stands for light. So it's a street lamp with integrated EV charging. Simple reason, street furniture. In India, the biggest problem is going to be, I don't have a place to park and charge. I typically keep my car at the roadside. This is what is, even if India, we were to say, no, roadside parking is illegal, etc., etc., but still people do park on the roads. So the best way to do it is standardize it, put up EV charging by the roadside. You will solve two problems. You will have designated parking plus revenue generation and EV charging. So you have solved multiple problems in the same go. That is a personal view of the street lamp flare. Another problem we're trying to solve rather is the residential charging. We realize that for huge complexes, you cannot have multiple wires dangling around in the parking lots. So we decided to try out, this is a pilot which went successful. is residential charging, where it's not only about the charger, it's the entire software, the software integration with the what do you say, building management systems, or we call it the FMS, facility management systems, so that all of these payment gateways, all of things can be taken care of. So this is one of the first pilots which went live in Mumbai. And this is how we are thinking of solving some of the challenges in EV charging. Like I said, we are now going international as well. Some of the solutions have got international interest. So we are going to Middle East and other Southeast Asian countries and trying to help people solve the EV charging problems. But I would like to leave everyone with one thought. It's not the end. I mean, there are enough problems in the EV charging spectrum of things for Southeast Asia. Even if someone were to choose only one problem and solve it thoroughly, I think there's a huge business model to be made out of it. And we are happy to support as a company. If there's anyone who's ready to try it out, pilot with us, we are more than game for taking it ahead with them. This is where I stop. I'm happy to take questions slightly later, but this was my part of the presentation. I hand it over back to the host. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maxine. I think the last statement that you made, that's the whole purpose of these webinars in terms of, exposing participants to the various options available. And I'm sure someone and somebody or some agency will definitely come forward to pilot what you have been proposing. With that, I would now like to invite the next speaker, Chandrasekhar Bide. He is the co-founder of Lithium Power. Chandrasekhar is an expert in the intelligent energy management for EVs, EV charging and battery swapping infrastructure, and has launched the data-driven intelligent energy platform for electric vehicles at Lithium Power. Chandrasekhar will speak on battery swapping model for 2- and 3-wheelers. So over to you, Chandrasekhar.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. I'll briefly talk about what we do on the swapping side and what are the different business models that we have gone to market with. Maxine and Chandana have covered a lot of ground, so I'll skip some of the slides and I'll directly go to the core part which I want to cover. Okay, so this is how we look at the ecosystem. So there are people on the OEM side. So these are the electric vehicle manufacturers. These are the battery pack manufacturers or assemblers. Okay, this is on the manufacturing side. There will be the infrastructure guys. So there could be charging and swapping infrastructure manufacturers. And there will be the charging station operators who manage these assets on a day-to-day basis. So this is more on the supply side. There will be people on the demand side, and I'm looking at fleet operators and the drivers. So these are more on the commercial side, but B2C customers could very well figure here. For the purposes of this discussion, I'll focus primarily on the B2B side because that is where bulk of the EV market is right now. Okay, the B2C segment is very, very minuscule as compared to the B2B market right now. And as in you would know the statistics. So right now there would be probably hardly 20,000 electric cars in the whole country. But if you look at the electric 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers, and on the commercial side, Delhi alone will have about 2 lakh electric vehicles. So the demand side consists of the fleet operators and the drivers. And then, after the August 2020 notification, which decoupled the batteries from the vehicles, making it easier to register and sell an electric vehicle minus the battery, there is a new class of entities which are interested in this space, and these are the asset financiers. So these would be interested in financing infrastructure assets, batteries on a portfolio level. So this is what we consider as the core ecosystem players. There are other service providers as well. There will be system integrators. There will be the utilities providers, right? But they are there for a reason, but they have a small role to play right now, the way it is right now. Okay. Now, what we at Leapin Power have done is created a intelligent energy delivery platform which interconnects all of these in different manners. And this is across hardware, embedded communication, software, data analytics, all of that. And this is all designed, developed in-house. So we exercise a lot of control and freedom on this. Moving on, before, as in, Chandana did mention about the different business models and the charging models, and how people are trying to have different models in this space. I'll take a step back and then talk about what is the interest levels, and what is the commercial interest of the different entities across different parameters. So that actually, if you can understand that, then it is very easy to come up with a business model which is suited for that particular use case. Okay, as in, and when I say use case, it has to be very sharply defined. For example, when you say B2B commercial electric vehicles, then it could be a shared public mobility, or it could be local intra-city delivery. Now, these two are different segments of customers. Their daily usage patterns are different. The commercials are different. Almost everything is different. Even though it could be clubbed as commercial utility, commercial vehicles, the business models will be different. Okay. So let's take a look at the electric vehicle OEMs. Okay. They probably might not be interested in the charging infrastructure because their business model is to design, develop, manufacture, and sell. Okay. And I'm taking two broad parameters. So one is on the charging infrastructure side, and second is on the additional battery side. Now, when I say additional batteries, it is from a swapping point of view. Okay, because swapping necessitates having additional batteries in the ecosystem, and one has to have a smart connected platform to ensure that at no point of time somebody is, say, 15-20 minutes away from a charged battery suited to their needs. So for the EV OEMs, they would have some interest in creating a battery or creating the space in the vehicle and making it swappable. So if the EV OEM decides not to make their batteries swappable, then obviously they cannot participate in this ecosystem. On the battery pack manufacturer side, they will be more interested in the physical design of the battery pack, how it integrates with the electric vehicle, how it can be lifted, moved, etc. Right? So they will be interested in the design from an infrastructure point of view. The charging infrastructure manufacturers, they will be interested in, of course, the design and the deployment, because they will also be in partnership with their customers, interested in creating a network wherein they, people will be able to come to their infrastructure and get those as in vehicles charged or battery swapped. They will also be interested in the form factor of the batteries. And again, this depends on the relationship, the nature of relationship they have with the battery pack guys. Okay, so if they get into a very tight arrangement, then it is a decent model, because then you'll be able to smoothly work with these two different entities. The charging point operator is the one who actually has the charging infrastructure installed on their premises, and then they operate it on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so of course the daily operations is their responsibility. They may also be involved in the deployment or the initial installation, etc., etc. They may or may not be involved in keeping the additional batteries. So this depends on the business model. In some cases, the charging point operator also has an additional inventory of batteries, which is used to provide swapping services. Then we look at the fleet operator. Now, the fleet operator is an entity which has X number of vehicles in a concentrated area. They know their daily patterns of usage. Their coverage areas are well identified. Their trips, whatever, everything is well documented. So they are in a position to determine which are the locations where charging infrastructure should be put up. And they can very well tie up with the charging point operators for offering them preferential services. In some cases, they would also be okay with having additional batteries specifically earmarked for their fleet. Okay, again, this depends on the scale of operations. If you have 1, 2, 5, 10 vehicles, then probably it does not make sense to invest in additional batteries. But if you have got a couple of hundreds, then it makes perfect commercial sense. So the fleet operator could be involved in the deployment of additional batteries. They could also be involved in the operational of swapping facilities. Now, one example, and this is what we have actually implemented, is that we have set up a charging and a swapping station in the premises of the fleet operator. So this makes the life of the drivers very, very easy, because they don't have to go elsewhere to get their battery swapped. In the same premises as their parking stations, they have charging stations, they get their goods loaded up on their vehicles. So it is also a delivery center. So again, this is a this is a business model which is a win-win for all involved, because the fleet operator anyway has the space there. They anyway have the commercial electricity connection. They have a couple of people who can help, who can assist with the manual swapping if it is that model, etc. And plus their drivers get it at the point where they want it. The asset financier, a relatively new entrant in this space, is more interested in the deployment at the financing stage, both for the charging infrastructure and for the additional batteries, which they want to own on a portfolio level. So these are the different reasons, or the objectives of the different entities to get into this on two broad parameters, which is on the charging infra side, which is the fixed stationary infra, and the additional batteries that you need to put in a swapping kind of ecosystem. Now, as an outcome of this, and this is very much use case specific, there will be additional batteries which are on the books of either the charging point operator or the fleet operator. It could be on the asset financier role, right? It could be a separate third party and financing and leasing it out to the charging point operator or the fleet operators. So we have actually implemented mix and match of some of these models in our implementations. So one slide to determine which is the best business case or which is the best business model for your kind of implementation. First and foremost, and I think this has to be stated because sometimes people lose sight of it, this is that please identify your customer segment and the product. Okay, so like I mentioned, B2B is a broad classification, but within that, whether it is shared passenger mobility or goods delivery makes a lot of difference. So please be very clear about the customer segment. Second is on the technology side, please ensure that the batteries that you have are really, really good quality. As in, I was very, very happy when Maxim spoke about safety and quality upfront, right? That is something that we need to be reminded of on a daily basis. We are just one large accident away from this whole industry getting a bad rap. The third is on the internals of the battery, which very few people understand in this space. So we were one of the first ones to design and develop an indigenous battery management system and roll it out commercially. Now, what happens is that most people overlook this key critical component because it comes sometimes bundled with the batteries, especially if it is imported from a neighboring country. Now, that does not work very well in India because Indian operating conditions are totally different. Also, on the technology side, it needs to be two-way communicable. It needs to be configurable. And if all of that is not there, then you cannot actually have an optimal utilization of the assets that you are deployed. Next point is on the temperature control. As in, people in Delhi will easily relate to this. Okay, summer has started, and so will be the issues on the thermal management of the batteries. Next is real-time telematics. Again, if you are in a swapping kind of a scenario where you want to swap or you want to reserve batteries on a real-time basis or for the next 5, 10, 15 minutes, then you need to know what is the current state of affairs on a per second basis. And that is enabled only by real-time telematics. If you don't have that, and so there are some business models wherein the data gets collected only when your battery is connected to a charging station, because the battery in itself does not have real-time communication and only the charging station, when it is connected, then you can get it. That, in my opinion, is little suboptimal because then you can't do optimization on the fly. You also need to have a very good network for servicing of batteries, maintenance of batteries. The next point is on the customer side. This is for payment. Again, there are different business models on the payment side also. So it could be on a per kilometer basis or per age of energy consumed or fixed X number of vehicles per day per location. So that is an output of the different business models that are there. The last one is very important from a service provider point of view. You need to roll out your solutions and test it out in the market for a minimum of 6 months. I mean, there are people who run their solutions for 100, 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, and then they start celebrating. That, to my mind, is a little short-sighted because you need to test the market, is the system out in the market for at least 6 months. And this should include at least one summer season and one rainy season, because everybody on this call will appreciate this. For batteries and for the charging infrastructure, heat, dust, and moisture are the top enemies. And India has abundant, as in quantity, of all of these three. So that is where I will stop. Over to the organizers, please.
Thank you, Chandrasekhar. That was a very interesting presentation on battery swapping. With that, we have come to the end of all the presentations. I'm sure the participants have a lot of questions. I can see that in the question answer box also. So now I would request Pramod, who is the Chief of Party for the SARE program, which is hosting this webinar, to actually now take us through the question answer session. Pramod has 15 years of experience in power, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and climate change portfolio. He's currently, as I said, the Chief of Party for this SARE program. Over to you, Pramod.
Thank you, Apurva. And thank you to all the speakers for excellent presentation and sharing their experience. How I plan to conduct the next 15 minutes. First, we have received few questions during registration, and the questions that are related to today's discussion, I'm going to start with them first, and then we'll come to the questions that have been posted by participants today. Given that in today's webinar, we covered three broad aspects related to cost, related to fee, and related to business models and risks. I'll categorize the questions in these three broad categories. And if after covering questions related to these three areas, if there is still some time left, then we can look at the other types of questions that we have received. So let's start with a question that we received from Bangladesh, and maybe Maxon, you can help answer this. What are the investment risks and how to mitigate them from the perspective of a financier?
Okay.
I think this is related to EV charging. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll just put down these 4 or 5 risks. One is the, from a business model, I'll first put a financial risk, and then I'll put a technology risk, and then I'll put a ecosystem risk. So I think first is the financial risk. The financial risk is that of largely utilization, because when you put up any asset, utilization, guaranteed utilization is very lean to come by. That's one point. Unless and until you tie up, which is also difficult. And second is the variations in the power, cost of power. Unknown to many, while the EV policies do talk about a certain rate per unit, but the actual billing that you may get is slightly higher. So unless and until you've baked all of it, there are 6 different things which are additional to the core base cost of power. So that is on the finance side, the risk on this, and this is something which you can pre-calculate and put that in. Second risk largely is from a technology perspective. One is the technological obsolescence that you need to be very clear about. Because unless and until the protocols, which now has got standardized, I would believe now it is CCS2, which is getting kind of, the fourth one is, one important thing is the quality of hardware. which we have seen as a bigger problem. And when I say big problem is essentially the ability to keep them up and running. You have to give guarantees of service. So the failure rates is pretty high in terms of the existing hardware that we see, which is available. And this is not only in India specific, because this is largely from many other places. And the last, but more often than not misunderstood or miscalculated is the communication. The entire EV business model is based on the ability for the charger or the charging device to stay connected to the CSMS or the central systems. Any breakage in that means you are either losing control of the charger, or you're actually losing revenue. And trust me on this, our biggest challenge our team today is solving, they're building the entire hardware for that, is that communication, guarantee of communication. So these are a couple of risks, small risks and large risks. So I've kind of bundled it all together. I hope I've tried to answer your question.
Thanks, Maxim, for a very detailed reply. A related question to this is, apart from the direct revenue from EV charging service, are there any other revenue streams that the service providers or your organization has been able to capitalize on?
Yeah, Pramod, I'm assuming the question is to me. I'm taking it as a continuation.
Yeah, Maxim. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you already see our software, the one that we've developed has those multiple levels, but we've not opened it up. We have a microservices concept, which means you're charging purely for charging. And even in charging, it is time of day. You can have variable charging at different times of day. That is only purely charging. But now let's come to the other streams. One is advertising as a revenue, parking as a revenue. Plus, there's a model which has started to believe that other infrastructure. In fact, we are working with Navi Mumbai Municipal Transport. And the entire deployment is not about charging. Charging is just 30% of the revenue. The other revenue is other services like a cafeteria, an ATM, those kind of models that are. So yes, these are some pilots going on, but at this point in time, I wouldn't want to say that this is something deployed, but this is where the entire ecosystem is moving to. Charging will be one component. There will be 3 or 4 additional services, and that entire package, the business model needs to stand on its own.
Thanks a lot, Maxim. So we have few questions related to battery swapping, and I request Mr. Chandrasekhar, if you can unmute yourself to answer those. The first question is, what are the major impediments in battery swapping model?
Okay. See, one of the obvious ones which people are aware about is the external form factor of the battery, right? Because and this is more true for two-wheelers, because two-wheelers don't have that much of a play or that much of a real estate to fix any kind of, to accommodate any kind of batteries. Whereas in three-wheelers, it is not that big a problem. There is a couple of centimeters here and there. And more or less the battery sizes are kind of standardized for three-wheelers. Okay, plus minus 1 or 2 centimeters. So that is the obvious one. But the more important one, which most people miss, is the technical characteristics, the technical parameters and the availability of those technical parameters on a real-time basis. So for example, I would want to know what is the individual cell voltages, the current being drawn, the capacity left, maybe location parameters like lat long, maybe some information about the vehicle, about the driver. So all that needs to be available on a real-time or at least on a near real-time basis. Now all that is dependent on the BMS, so the battery management system, and the telematics inside it. If it is not a configurable two-way communicable BMS, then you can't have all of this. Okay, as in you will never know what is the real state of affairs in the battery, because the information that you might have may be outdated. Okay, and few minutes here and there will make a lot of difference because your vehicle could come to a stop, right? So the just summarizing the answer, obviously the external form factor of the battery, then the communication, the technical parameters, the BMS inside the battery, and yes, of course, the connectors. The connectors are more or less standardized, so I don't think that is that much of an issue.
Thanks a lot. We have few questions related to cost, the installation cost, and related to the economics of charging stations. So may I request Rajesh, if you can answer those questions. And The first question is actually, is there a possibility for 50% cost reduction for electric vehicles? And this is a question from Bhutan. I'm assuming that the person is interested to know about the cost reduction of vehicle and not related to the cost of charging station. So yeah, Chandrasekhar, maybe you can answer.
Yeah, I can maybe take a shot at it. Okay. So everybody knows that the cost of the battery is significant compared to the EV, right? So 45-50% of the cost of the electric vehicle, the upfront cost, is because of the battery. If battery can be taken out of the equation and then given on a subscription basis, this is the answer to the gentleman's question, right? So you can easily do that. But that depends on the local regulations, right? And the ability of the EV OEMs to allow that kind of a model.
Yeah, that's one way. The other, which other speakers mentioned, if there is a decline in battery and if it continues to decline in the manner it has happened in past few years, plus because of economies of scale, I'm sure the cost will further reduce. Today already in many parts of the world, it is at par with the normal vehicle. So I'll move to Rajesh for a question related to utilization. And the question is, at what utilization percentage a charging station breaks even? So for a charging station to become viable, what is that minimum utilization percentage, if you can give some indication? Rajesh?
Yeah, so there is no fixed tariff. This question basically is that what should be the optimum end consumer tariff? There is no direct answer to that. I think if one has to go, perhaps the rate of end consumer tariff should be equal such that per kilometer cost of charging an EV through a public charging station should not be more than per kilometer of cost being if it has been an IC engine vehicle. So if he has to go to a fueling station. Now, it may depend. In some areas, the utilization required may be very low. In some areas, the utilization required may need to be very high, so that the charging infrastructure business, which is dependent purely on the revenue from charges, from charging, break evens. It's a very what would be the optimum cost and consumer tariff that needs to be taken into consideration for that.
Thanks, Rajesh. And another question related to cost, and maybe Maxon can also chip in once you have answered it. And it's a question which is hypothetical. If a charging station has to be 100% powered through on-site solar, what sort of cost increase? How many times the cost of charging station will increase if it has to be locally powered?
It's very difficult to provide like 100% green power through a dedicated source to chargers, because how and when the charging infrastructure would be utilized is difficult to be predicted. However, if there is a large complex where the chargers are also installed, smart chargers are installed, and solar plus batteries are used to power the whole infrastructure, the whole complex, then perhaps there is a possibility that we can provide 100% green energy to the chargers. Now, having said that, even if we have to consider that dedicatedly you need to have solar system plus battery system. So whatever the capacity of the charger is, perhaps that capacity of solar system would be required to be installed dedicatedly. And maybe considering the overall utilization of 5 to 20%, certain battery capacity would also be required to be installed. But that would actually lead to very redundant investment if it is not powering anything else as well.
Thanks, Rajesh. So one question related to how to improve the charging infrastructure deployment in India, given the situation of pandemic and lack of capital. and how to increase EV adoption subsidy free. So if Maxon, you can answer this question in brief.
Sure. So quick one. Yes, I think right now the requirement of the nation is to heal the nation, and every money, every rupee should be spent there. I mean, without doubt, I'm one of those. But whenever the things are behind us, the worst is behind us. What India requires is opening up of real estate. I believe that the adoption of EV is all dependent upon not the business model, but the comfort that people get, that wherever they go, there is an EV charger available. And studies have shown that 20% of the people in Europe go back to their normal vehicles because there is no charger around. So how this is going to open up is there's a lot of land banks which are not monetized, largely lying with the state and central government and a lot of other bodies, and which are lying unutilized, and those need to be opened up. Just a simple example: post offices. I mean, when was the last time someone went to a post offices? And it's there in every pin code. There's a post office. So these are some smart ideas which need to be moved up. Allow government plus private companies to work together and get it knocked off. And I think that's you cannot look at the traditional model. EV is it's a game changer in both in technology, both in business models, also in the thinking. And I think that's where we need to push some of these standard ways of doing things, and only then it will succeed. That's my version, especially for India.
I agree
Thanks,
with Maxon's view on this. I think there are a lot of municipalities who provide parking at very low cost. There are parking vendors available also there. Perhaps EV charges first can be installed in all those areas, because wherever there are parking, people usually have a route going through that particular parking, and railway stations have a lot of land space available. Perhaps those locations first should be used for installation of chargers. And in that also, it should be ensured that there is no fixed cost that is being attributed to the CPO. It should be only on utilization basis.
So Rajesh, while you are unmuted, one question related to, are there any installation or idea of e-charger in public but private buildings? This is a question in the Q&A window.
I didn't actually understand the question, what is being asked.
So any other speaker, Chandrasekhar or Maxon, if you have understood this question?
Yeah. I think I'll take that
yes,
question. Chandrasekhar is also smiling because I think he knows. So yes, so the question is, in a private building, you put up a charger, but it is available to the public as well. So, it's a super optimization of a private space for public. The answer is a yes. We did this model. We did this in Navi Mumbai at one complex. The complex said that they had something called as a entrance to the building area. They had something called as a public parking, which means for visitors parking. So that's where they put up the chargers. But this was purely because it was outside the boundaries, but connected to the gates. But if it is inside public, no, I don't think that is going to work out because people don't like external. I mean, in the current situation, not many people would want outsiders to come into their building. So it cannot be a single answer. I think it is going to be specific to individual locations. But yes, that pilot has already been done. And it did throw up a lot of use cases for buying of EVs in that specific area. That's my quick answer.
I would like to add to this. Again, there has been this idea that people want to have one or two slots or few slots reserved for EV charging at malls. Okay. Now it has to make commercial sense for the mall owner. Mall parking isn't exactly cheap. Okay. And looking at the utilization of the infrastructure, which is by no means cheap, if you're not getting an adequate ROI, then the mall management will easily decide to have a regular parking instead of a EV charging one, right? So yes, technically it is possible, but again, the commercials have to make sense, and that all depends on the utilization factor. Okay. Earlier, somebody was asking about how to increase utilization, right? So I will again reiterate the fact, be very clear about who is going to be your user base. If it is a B2C customer, a retail individual like you and me, charging their electric vehicle at home or at office or wherever, then there is hardly any incident where I will require charging at some other place. That will be emergency charging, right? So utilization obviously is not going to be high. But if you are focusing on the commercial segment, then it is possible, right? In fact, in the last 4 months of pandemic, we have increased our EV fleet delivery business because the number of e-commerce companies and their deliveries has grown significantly in the last 4 months because of lockdown. 30-40% month-on-month increase has happened, and which means more deliveries, which means more vehicles on the road, which means more orders, everything more, right? So we took the conscious call of co-locating our charging and swapping stations with the delivery centers of some of our partners, and that has worked wonders. So again, utilization can be increased if you know your customer segment. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks. I'll take one.
There are a lot of pilots
Yes.
not being done for P2P charging. In US and Germany, number of companies have initiated this particular model using blockchain as technology enabler. So it's time since, so we will perhaps see this similar model coming up in India as well.
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh. I'll take one last question, and I request Maxon if he can be very brief in his response. How open are utilities to allow open access to make your chargers powered by a larger share of renewable?
So it is not dependent on utilities. It is dependent on something called as the Electricity Act, and CERC defines it. And by definition, at the point of consumption, it has to be minimum 1 megawatt. Only then open access is allowed. Typical charging stations do not take 1 megawatt. So but unless and until there's a huge charging hub with 1 megawatt, it is possible. I think that's the short and sweetest answer I could give on this. Technically, right.
Thanks, Maxon. So we always try to address as much queries as we can, but of course there is a time limitation. So we have shared everyone's email address with participants. If there are more questions, you can contact them directly. With this, I'll invite Ms. Monali Jia Hajra, Regional Energy Manager and Clean Energy Specialist at USAID India, for concluding remarks. Over to you, Monali.
Thank you so much, Pramod. It's howling, the wind is really howling outside, but yeah, a good weather change at least. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. I mean, we don't need to talk about the benefits of e-mobility. Everybody knows that, yeah, it would help us reduce emission as well as address many of the air pollution and petroleum import challenges. It also would provide a flexible demand. It could also act as a flexible demand for the power utilities and help increase the demand in off-peak period as well as supporting the grid integration. So, all of us on today's webinar quite know about the benefit and are looking to, each of the governments in the region, South Asia, is looking at embarking on an e-mobility program. They are looking at, setting up right sort of policy and regulatory framework. So I do hope that the 2 energy series which we have done has helped in terms of, bringing in the knowledge and experiences from one country, particularly India, and helping you gain some sort of insight of what is that which can be done in order to fast track your journey towards accelerated deployment of e-mobility in the region. And I'm sure that you will be in touch not only with the SARE team, but also with some of the speakers who have been excellent, sharing their experience on ground, experiences and on the field. So with that, I would like to thank our panel member. Thank you so much to all the speakers as well as to the audience member for their participation, especially during a very difficult time. I know that many other countries are also facing challenges just as India is. So we really appreciate the time you have taken off to join us today. And I do hope that all of you would remain safe and healthy. As is the trend with our webinars, the recording as well as the presentation of this webinar will be shared with all the attendees. So you should be hearing back from us within a week or so. And I would like to congratulate and thank the organizing team, Sare, Pramod, Dipshita, Atul, the Spark team, as well as AEEE for joining in this collaboration to present this webinar. We are looking at organizing more such energy series And the next one, hopefully, that the plan is at least that we will be focusing on deployment of renewable energy. So we look forward to seeing many of you back in that. There will be few other offerings which will be coming as a result of the hub, but you will get to know about it eventually. So with that, I would like to thank all of you. Please do take care and stay safe. So that's it from my end, Pramod, I guess, but we did want to take a photograph.
Yeah, yeah. So we request all panelists to stay for a minute for the customary photo. Thank you.
Apurva? Yes. You switched
Apurva,
off.
your video.
Yeah. Now
Trying.
Okay, wish we could do it in person, but this is the best we have before the storm takes over.
yeah.
Done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for joining us today.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
and
you.
have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you for joining.